Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is a very special one. Her name is Manoela, the CEO and co-founder at Pipo Saúde. Manoela, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, we have been trying to do this for a while now,
True.
and if I can share, if not, we will edit this part. You'll be married soon. You run a marathon in the meantime. So and you are still scaling an health tech company in Brazil. Okay, how is it possible to do all of this in the same year?
It takes a village to raise a kid. So even though I'm doing a lot of things, I have a lot of support in the company, in my family, and also in the marathon. I think I had like a big team behind me, so that's how I can do it.
But let's get to know more about you. So, who is Manuela? How has been your career, and how the passion to start at People came, and then we keep moving forward.
Perfect. So, who's Manuel? That's a deep question, but I'll start from the beginning. So I'm actually half British and half Brazilian. So my dad is English and my mom is Brazilian. Both of my parents are literature professors.
Wow.
Not professors, but graduates. So I don't come from a background where I had like business in my household.
Uh-huh.
But I was a very different kid from I think the beginning. So one episode that I like to kind of like mention a lot is I had like a student fair when I was 4 years old, and then they asked the kids what you wanted to be when you grow up,
Uh-huh.
and then you had like the usual answers like I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a soccer player, and I said I
Right.
wanted to be the president of Brazil. So
Wow.
I was always kind of like on the different side. I always had a lot of ambitions for myself. And then another interesting episode when I was 15, I studied in a high school here in Brazil where they had the habit of writing yourself a letter, and then you
Right.
would receive that letter 10 years after that. So I
Wow.
wrote the letter when I was 15. I received the letter when I was 25.
I
And
love
in the
it.
letter, I said I wanted to be a businesswoman and I wanted to travel around the world.
Wow.
In a way, it was always there. And then I decided to do economics for my graduate degree.
Mhm.
And when I was in economics, I was like, where are the successful people going to, right? And that was literally 14 years ago. And then it was basically I had two places to go, right? So either
Mhm.
people that were more ambitious were going to the financial market, or they
Right.
were going to management consulting. And then I kind of like spoke to a few people that were doing one or the other, and then I was like, I think financial market it suits me better.
Mhm.
So I started working in the financial market. I started as a trader, which is interesting
Wow.
as well. So I started in a trading desk. I didn't like it very much, to be honest. Like I started in a trading desk. I thought it was kind of like very intense, but not very analytical. I'm a very analytical person. I like to read. I like to do analysis. I like to process things quite slowly. And then I moved to credit slash investment banking, and then
Right.
I moved to private equity, where I stayed the largest part of my career before starting a company. I
Mhm.
stayed for almost 8 years doing private equity here in Brazil. Um, I work in two different funds, the
Mhm.
sovereign wealth fund of Singapore, which is called Temasek,
Exactly.
and then I went to another fund called Actis, which is also a British fund focused on emerging markets. In both these funds, I was focused on healthcare, and that was totally by chance.
Wow.
I did a little bit of financial services as well, and then in 2018, when I decided to leave, I actually decided to leave because I wanted to start a business in the intersection between financial services and healthcare.
Right.
And that's how my entrepreneurial journey starts. And it took me a year to start People.
Wow. And so now I'm curious to get to know more that year, how it looks like, and how have you evolved your thesis? How did you have the courage to get out of your private equity, I would say, prestigious role and comfortable life to kind of start everything from the scratch
Yeah.
with the dream. How has been that process? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure that a lot of people that are now listening to the show, of course, some of them are already starting their companies and scale their companies, but a lot of them might be executives that are thinking, is this the right timing for me to start a company? Maybe not yet, and understanding how it looks like to go through the discovery and building the thesis, it's really important, right?
Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting year in my life, like 2018, 2019. Um, First thing, like when I was doing private equity, uh, for a while, I was looking at the entrepreneurs that we were looking to back, and I always felt like, those people on the other side of the table, they are way more interesting than me and my bosses and the people that work with me. So
Okay.
so I think that feeling grew, and I was like, I don't want to be here kind of like evaluating things in a PowerPoint in an Excel. I want to
Mhm,
be building.
mhm.
So I had this urge to kind of like create things, and I think that took me probably 4 years to kind of like really jump from that boat. Um, and I think the main reason why it took me a while to jump is what you just mentioned, right? Private equity was prestigious. I was traveling a lot. I was like going to meetings with a lot of interesting people.
Right.
I had a good salary. So it took me a while to break this inertia.
Mhm.
And I had a boss in the beginning of my career that he always said, you have to do the things for the right reasons, and you have to understand what's the cause and what's the consequence.
Mhm.
And for after a while, I was like, I think money is being my cause, not my consequence.
Got
And
it.
after a lot of self-reflection and a lot of kind of like understanding myself, I was like, I'm not happy doing this. I'm just staying because it's comfortable. So I decided to leave. And the moment was also a good moment because I was in a fund that was raising another fund. So we were in between funds. So it was kind of like, that place that gives you the moment to say, let's do it. And then I did it. I left. I had money, so I was in a privileged position. I had money to think.
That is great.
One of
Yeah.
my co-founders was already in that mission with me.
Mhm.
So me and Tiago, we decided to kind of like Tiago was in his MBA, leaving his MBA. I was there, and we started exploring things together. And the first time I started, like in the beginning, I did it with a private equity mindset. And a private equity mindset is I have this thesis on PowerPoint, it looks
Mhm.
great, and I'm gonna pursue it.
Right.
I didn't have a lot of connection with the problem and with the people and how it actually worked in real life, but
Mhm.
I literally spent hours and hours reading research reports, interviews. I knew everything about the market. I didn't know a lot about how it actually worked, and that's
Right.
how I started my first kind of like investment thesis.
Love it.
And then I went there to do it, and literally everything in real life was different from what was written in the paper. So just to be really quick here, I wanted to do a company
Yeah.
that was looking at fraud in the healthcare system.
Mhm.
So the underlying thesis was I'm gonna receive the healthcare data from the HMOs and the PPO, so the health insurers. I'm gonna
Mhm.
process that data. I'm gonna find fraud from the doctors, from the hospitals, and I'm gonna save the system money, and that's gonna reduce the healthcare costs of the
Right.
system as a whole. That was kind of like my vision, right? Then the first healthcare company that I went to
The Robin
visit,
Hood
I literally arrived there.
vision.
The Robin Hood vision. The
Yeah.
first company I went, I was like, the go to market. My head it was like the go to market. I'm gonna start with small companies. The first
Mhm.
company for small health company, health insurers. The first health insurer I visited was like in the countryside of São Paulo. I took a bus, five
Mhm.
hours,
Wow.
overnight. Went there, met the people, shook hands, and I was like, I'm building the software. It's AI. I need a small percentage of our healthcare claims so I can process and I can show to you how efficient it's gonna be. I didn't have anything, right? I only had the idea. And
Love
then
that.
the guy the guy came and he was like probably 67 years old. He looked at me and he was like, we don't have this digitalized. It's paper. the hostel sends me a receipt,
Right.
and then the receipt arrives here, and then we have a team that looks at every receipt, and then they approve or they don't approve, and then they go to one pile or to the other pile. And then I had this whole idea of like AI that didn't conversate with what the real situation was, right?
Right.
So after a while, I decided to kind of like pivot, and then from that pivot, I actually ended up doing Pipo Saúde.
And now we are super curious you are doing an amazing story. You are sharing an amazing story, Manoela, because now I'm the host and I'm kind of, please tell me the next step. So for the ones who are listening to us, what is Pipo Saúde? What is the mission of people, and what is the vision, etc., etc.
Good. So I'm fast forwarding the other months that we stayed in my house doing research and discovery and trying, but we ultimately ended up starting Pipo in July 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Pipo is a a tech-enabled healthcare brokerage that helps companies buy and manage their benefits,
Mm-hmm.
while also establishing a direct connection with the employees and helping them in their healthcare journey.
Mm-hmm.
So the vision here is, so just to provide some context to people that are kind of like listening but are not necessarily familiar with healthcare.
Yes.
So in Brazil, 70% of the healthcare market is basically a company is buying healthcare plans for their employees. So it is a corporate sponsored market, as we say, and that's why we did a healthcare brokerage that is actually it's a B2B business. So we talk to companies, we help them buy their healthcare plans, their life plans, their dental plans, their whatever plans they want to have, or whatever healthcare benefits they want to have. But the companies get their price adjusted every year depending on their utilization, right, of that benefit. So if there are like a lot of diseases or people misusing their healthcare plans, what ends up happening is that the healthcare cost goes up every year, and historically it has been going up 3 times more than the average inflation, right? So the healthcare cost is 3 times accelerating 3 times faster than the salaries, and that's why we decided to establish a direct connection with the member or the employee, because we want to help them use use their healthcare benefits in a better way that also avoids cost. So how can we monitor the people that have chronic diseases? How can we take people away from the emergency room and towards specialists? How can we help people keep engaged with the healthcare situation every year rather than discovering diseases in the end, which costs a lot of money and also have a very low chance of figuring out that condition that they just discovered. So that's a little bit of what we are trying to do, and we say that our vision is uh, to become the platform that turns healthcare into something that's simple and also accessible
Definitely, it's
to everyone.
lots of complexity, and we could be here speaking about all day about the complex, or not even all day, all month or all week about the complexities
Yes,
of
for
the
sure.
healthcare system, how to align incentives, how to be able to ensure engagement, etc., etc., treatment adherence. So a lot of factors. And of course, you are very well backed. And in terms of stage of growth, you have raised the Series A last year. If you want also to share some of your investors, I also have here the list, but Thrive Capital, Kazek, Atlantico, One VC,
Yeah.
Monashis, and also a very well-known angel that is backing people, David Vélez, that is kind of one of the main icons of the Brazilian and Latin ecosystem,
Yeah.
and a $20 million Series A round last year. Feel free to add any other stats in terms of stage of growth for the ones who are listening, just to relate, understand where you are in terms of stage of growth, right?
Yeah. So we started the company in 2019. We had this big discussion whether we should start it with our own money, bootstrap it a bit, or fund it straight away with like a pre-seed round.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to go with the pre-seed. that was led by Mona X and Mon VC, and also David Velez as the largest angel. And I think that's kind of like interesting to share because a lot of people might kind of like face the same challenge, right? Should I
Right.
do it with my own money? Should I raise external capital? What are the pros and cons? And then for us, it was like, what's the moat of the business we are building? And then the
Got
moat
it.
was like, we need to build a product that creates an amazing experience for both the HR and for the member. So they are engaged with our solution, and that creates that leads to the vision that we are seeing here. And thinking about products with the current market, if you want to hire good engineers, if you want to have product as your moat, you need to spend money. And we were like, we will never be able to do it with our own money. We don't have that amount of capital to be competitive. And on
Right.
top of that, the most talented engineers will be drawn to large names in the cap table.
Right.
So fundraising can be also a talent advantage in that sense, like having good funds. So we started with that round. A little bit later, we started picking up traction quite fast. We had kind of like a continuation to our seed round that was led by Kazakh. And then later, we had our Series A last year because we were picking up a lot of traction as well. And we wanted to accelerate that growth trajectory. But above all, we wanted to invest even more in product, right? I have this thesis that healthcare, it doesn't go like this in a curve that it's exponential. Healthcare goes in an exponential trajectory, but it starts slow and then it really picks up.
Got it.
So you are building today the advantages of the future. And if we wanted to invest a lot in product, if we wanted to have the best in class engineers, the best in class product professionals, the best in class designers, we needed to have
Right.
money. We needed to, and then we ended up raising a large Series A, even though we are not a capital intensive business model. So we don't have coupons, we don't have logistics. We literally spend money in salaries, and we have a few M&A opportunities, but M&A is something that you can choose to do or not to do. So it
Got it.
was really, really about hiring the best talent out there.
Got it. Super, super interesting. And I was maybe also thinking that from pre-seed to the series that we were talking about, this transition from the private equity world and navigating this pre-seed stage and this seed stage, I think that now you are getting a little bit closer to the kind of the stage that you were in at maybe still a little bit smaller than at that time in the private equity world, but it should have been a huge challenge to go through those kind of 3 years to go from pre-seed to A, right? And I think that that's also one of the periods that the founders are most afraid of, because they know that it will be painful to go through Series A, Series B, etc. But it will be a great sign that they were able to get there as you did. So congratulations.
Exactly. No, thank you. And I think, like, to be honest, I think some of the listeners also might relate to that.
Yeah.
If you look at the startup world here in Brazil, a lot of the founders, they came from the financial market, from the for management consulting. Now we have a few founders that actually worked in startups before, but the startup
Right.
ecosystem is very new, so you don't have a lot of people with a lot of experience. And when you are in one of those environments, you are raised and trained to be a sniper. That's the analogy I always used. So when I was in private equity, I was a sniper, right? I had like
Love
an
it.
analyst and an intern, but I wasn't really managing people. And the way I was adding value was because I was good at what I was doing, and I was producing a lot of kind of like material analysis and guiding people to help me throughout this process. And that's more of what it feels like to be a founder when you are in the beginning. When you are in the beginning, CEO is only a fancy name to a very good individual contributor. You are literally just doing everything that a company needs. So you are selling, you are like
Right.
going to the bank, you are having lunch with people that are like that you want to attract. So it feels a lot similar in the beginning. And then after a while, you start growing the company and you have more people. And then the way you add value, it's very, very different from the way I used to add value as a private equity investor. So that transformation wasn't easy. I'm still going through and learning what to do in the CEO role. And everyone learns, like no one is, especially people that come from like they were not a CEO, they have
Right.
to learn how to do it. And the value that I add is through things that I do that will help other people, that will help the organization. So currently I add value by hiring the right people, giving them the right mission, putting them in the right place,
Right.
unblocking things that might be kind of like blocking their speed. And sometimes that's the organization, sometimes that's kind of like the interdependencies that your company has created historically. And literally, when you are a CEO of a company that has 200, 250 people, which is our case right now, if I work from 9 to 7 or if I work from 9 to midnight, the marginal time that I work won't make people make it or break it. And when people had 10 or 15 people, that was the case.
Right.
Because now if you look like you have 250 people, you multiply by that the amount of hours. If I add 3 or 4 hours more,
Right.
that won't be what's taking people to the next level, right? You
Will
have
not
to
move the
create things
needle.
that,
Yeah.
that scale.
Right.
So that's very difficult, and I think that has been a very challenging process, but also a very interesting one on a personal level.
In a certain way, there is something that also helps when you come from this background, is that you are able to bridge the to be in the founder seat, also understanding the investor mindset, and being able also in one of the main roles of a CEO, that is able to ensure that there is always cash in the bank, and we go through fundraising, that you understand also what is the business of the VC, and in that sense, you didn't need to learn everything
Yeah.
from the scratch. Of course, it's always different to be in the driver's seat than to be pitched, but at least you know how the investor thinks, and you are able, even I would say, even as an operator, understanding how to look into the business and what are the variables that matter, and where we should focus. I think that the investor mindset also helps. Do you feel that?
Definitely. I think like probably the thing that was, apart from doing things very fast, like doing analysis and stuff like that that I learned in my previous life, I think fundraising definitely was an advantage for me as a founder because I come from a private equity background, and I know how investors think, right? So it's easier for me to position our story and our thesis because I know how their brain functions, in many ways. So that's something when I kind of like talking to other entrepreneurs that came from a very different background and stuff. Sometimes the people are really focusing on the execution, the operation, and they give this really micro view. And to be honest, like for fundraising, it's not about the micro, but it's really about the macro story you're telling. Like, how big
The
is the
narrative.
opportunity? How can I differ? How I'm gonna capture that opportunity? What's the mode I'm building? Um,
Right.
and then finally, like why now and why I'm the right person, right? Or why we're the right company.
Right.
So I think kind of like having that helicopter view that I had as an investor helped me pitch the idea as well.
Yeah. And again, after understanding how it works, it seems kind of simple, but it takes a long time and a lot of years to finally start handling all those concepts and putting everything together. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's move into something that I know that you really love, which is to talk about culture. And I've been following you also on LinkedIn, and there are amazing insights on your LinkedIn page around culture. You also keep giving talks and so about the topic. So what do you think are the main pillars to be able to retain and attract talent, and I would say, or why culture is important, if we want to start with a question even before that? Right.
Yeah. I think culture is definitely one of my passions as a CEO. Um, as I was saying, like what moves a company, what is responsible for moving a company
Mhm.
forward, and how do you actually scale the execution? In the end, it's about like having the right people with the right incentives and powered by a great culture. Because when you are kind of like running a startup or working in a startup, it's
Mhm.
tough, you know. And I think it's like
Yeah.
you work longer hours than you would work in a multinational company. You have a lot of problems all the time. Things break. You have it's stressful. So you know, kind of like, and then to face that, you have of course you have victories and things that like that make you
Right.
realize because you're building things, but it's also that there is a dark side, you know, that people not often comment about it, but it's
Yeah.
there and it's very present in the culture. And then for you to be able to stay in this environment for a long period of time, and kind of like power through, you need to really, really be inspired by the place you work. And that means I admire the culture, admire how people act, and I also admire how smart they are and how they're solving problems, right? So there is
Mhm.
that feeling of being in a place where like I look to the left side and I see people that are really smart. I look to the right side, I look at there are people that are they're really smart. So I think culture plays a big role. And more on top of that, you have a very competitive market of people trying to get your talent, especially
Right.
especially when you're talking about engineering, product, that you have international competition. So why do people stay, right? Why do people actually decide to earn a lower salary than they could? Because they could work for any company in the US and make more money than they're going to make in Brazil. I would say from
Right.
99.9% of the places that they work, they stay because they love building something. They like their colleagues and they like how their colleagues behave. And I think how people behave, that's exactly what's culture, right? So
Mhm.
that's why I'm so passionate about it here at People, because I think it's super important. And because we are a remote company, I think we have to be super intentional about it. So company is not like culture is not like, oh, culture is what happens. No, culture is what
Right.
you make happen. You know, it's how you the rituals you create, how you incentivize people, how you fire people, how you promote people. I think that's actually what creates a culture.
Right. And I like the very simple way you articulate it, right? So why people stay here, it's because they really enjoy the colleagues that they work with, and the way they behave, and that's why they don't move to other countries and to other cultures where they can have an higher financial compensation, but maybe they would not have such an high emotional compensation or fulfillment or happiness compensation. And you think that, of course, this is and we talk, that's true, we were talking about fundraising, we were talking about the investment mindset, the founder mindset, but we always think about the secret sauce for the customer. That's all about in the slides. If we think about the fundraising deck, it's all about what is the secret sauce for the customer, how we will win the category. And we know that talent nowadays is a critical ingredient also to win that battle. And we never talk what is our secret sauce to be able to attract and retain that talent. And I like the way we are talking about it, because you are really putting the focus on how can we, how are we able to develop a secret sauce or a moat for our people to stay with us, to create a moat for our customers to stay with us, which is retention,
Yeah,
retention, retention, and retention attracts acquisition. uh,
yeah.
Interesting.
I think something I've learned um, as an entrepreneur in the past 3 years is you can add a lot of value to the company by hiring the right people. That's for sure. But hiring people won't be the miracle that you are looking for.
Mhm.
So people come, they don't have context, they don't know your business. It's going to take a while for them to perform, you know? So if you have the right people and then they stay, you don't lose the context. And context is extremely powerful.
Love it.
So I think that that's kind of like, that's why you have to think about retaining the right talent a lot. And sometimes for people in the video, I'm sorry, my cat is is part of
Sounds
the
amazing. It's part. He wants to play a role in the podcast. So that's the new
exactly,
star of the
exactly.
podcast.
Yes,
For the ones who are listening, the cat of Manuela just went through the laptop,
the
and we had
video.
kind of a relaxing moment for everyone to rest, and it keeps going again and again and again. So saying that culture
Yeah.
is super important and it needs to be very well treated as part of the family.
Exactly.
And this is a good introduction about diversity and inclusion. And why do you think this is so important in terms of building the culture?
Yeah. Um, I think like for us here at People, just provide people some context, we are super, super kind of like big about diversity and inclusion. It's even one of our five pillars in terms of culture. So we take it very seriously. And I have a very pragmatic approach to life. And I also take diversity and inclusion like from a pragmatic standpoint, right? So for me, it's like if you want to innovate, so if you want to do things different from how the status quo is doing, you need to have a fresh perspective, right? On how that problem is being analyzed or how the solutions are being created. And I think diversity and inclusion really, really is the sauce of that new perspective. So if you want to create things differently, you need to have different people thinking different things, right? So you want to have fresh perspectives, and diversity is exactly that. So you have people from different genders, different backgrounds, different races, different sexual orientations. So that's how we started thinking about diversity. And we also thought that it would be easier to start a business with that mindset rather than create that mindset throughout our life. So sometimes when I talk to people about diversity and inclusion, I see a lot of people saying, oh, it's too early. I'm not going to think about that right now. I'm going to think about that later when I hire someone to do it. Like diversity and inclusion, it's better to have that mentality embedded in the company from the D0 because it's going to be way easier for you to really create a diverse environment. And also diversity inclusion is not someone that you might have a head of diversity inclusion, but she's gonna be responsible for doing certain things, right? For the company to be really diverse and inclusive, it needs to be from the leadership, from the founders, from the CEO. So I think those were kind of like our key learnings throughout the process. And we started as a very diverse company, and we continue to be one.
Again, another element of that secret sauce to be able to create an environment that can compete with any other environments and also be able to win compared to another financial parameters that can be offered to people that startups and even scale-ups that are very well funded, which is the case of people, are still not able to compete with, but they can at the same time compete with those large multinationals in a way that they are not also able to change their culture, because change management is so complex, especially at a certain size, as you said. If it is not built,
Yeah.
if it is not built from the beginning, it will be almost impossible to change the culture in the middle. So yeah, I love the intentionality on building the culture, and especially as you said, it's very tempting to leave it for another time because there are so many stuff to do, and every founder knows that there are so much life and death moments that the last thing that you would think would be about culture, but I think that it's definitely a critical element, and this is something also that second time founders always say, right? I should have taken more care of culture. If I start a company again, I will start with culture first, and if I need to be thinking about it for a week or two and giving it even more importance than into the fundraising deck or a similar kind of importance, is curious to listen that. And something
Yeah.
amazing is we are seeing, and I like to see in health tech in Brazil, female founders leading scale-ups, which is great to see. We are seeing more gender parity than in other verticals, like for instance fintech and so on. How do you see that evolution, and how is being a female leader and a female CEO in Brazil and Latam?
Yeah. So I think that uh, there is definitely like there is definitely a lot of change going on. So I would consider probably myself as a second or third generation of startup or scale up founders in Brazil. Like there is the first generation in the early 2000s or mid 2000, then there's like Nubank, and I think there's probably like 2010, 2012, and then Quinto Andar, and then now 2022, 2000. There's like we are somewhere in between the second and the third generation, and you definitely see the profile changing, right? But it's a process and it takes time, because what you need for like the system to really change, you need to have a lot of you need to have female founders on the founder seat, and you have to have female investors on the investor seat as well. Because it's I would say, like, I come from a private equity background, so it's not something that I can really relate. But to be honest, I think VCs, they really reward people for being aggressive and for having a bold vision and for having kind of like telling what they want to be. And it's more natural to men to be in that seat saying, I'm going to be gigantic, I'm going to be the next Nubank of wah. I think females are way more kind of like conservative, you know, like, I want to get there one day, but now I want to go from point A to point B, you know. And sometimes that's not rewarded the same place. So I think the ecosystem needs to change, but there is definitely a lot of females emerging, founders and CEOs, and a lot in the healthcare and education spaces, because I do feel that those sectors, they have a lot of purpose embedded in them. So I want to revolutionize the healthcare system. I want to provide better care to people, and the same is true for education, right? I think for kind of like some stuff like fintech infrastructure that can be a little more technical, you don't see as much females as you see in healthcare, for instance.
It's interesting, the connection with the purpose, that is super important for women, and I think that for a lot of men, I consider it super important to me as well. But agreed. I think that there is this capacity of thinking for the common goods that women have embedded even stronger than men in general. I like that approach to that. Okay, cool. And is there any kind of general advice about kind of go-to-market product, fundraising, any topic that you think that when you look back and you see some of your mistakes, some of your lessons learned, something that you really would like to tell yourself, and of course this will be part of the next segment, but just a kind of not going through the typical questions of what are your fundraising lessons, your go-to-market lessons, because we will not have enough time in this show. But any thoughts that you'd like to share with founders that are listening to us that were critical to you?
Yeah, I think, like, if we were to talk about my mistakes and things I would do different, we would need a week probably, or a month. But a few things I would point out, I think, for different for different types of founders in different stages, right? I think the first big mistake I made was I fell in love with the solution before falling in love with the problem.
Great one. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like something I always advise people, like, are you really, really passionate about the problem you're solving? Because the solution can change, and it will probably change, right? It's very probable.
Right.
I think that the second mistake that I made was I really underestimated how complex a few things would be. So kind of like B2B sales, right? You read some books, you talk to some people, you kind of have sales machine vibe, and it does feel like a funnel that will be, and it's extremely tough, and you will need a lot of founder sweat allocated to it, because I think the superpower that you have as a founder, you are not the smartest person in the room, you are probably not the most technical person in the room, but as a founder, you have the ability to receive a lot of punches and stay up, right?
Right. Resilience.
And resilience. You keep pushing, you keep trying. It's not A, it's B, it's C, it's D. So in those problems, it's really useful to have the founder involved. And I would think about those problems as if I was thinking about what people needs to be a successful business and I had to list kind of like 3 or 4 things. What are those?
Mhm.
So we need to scale. We need to build an amazing product that creates a competitive advantage versus the market, that creates actually product value. It's not only a nice experience to using the app, because that's not what's gonna take us there.
Right.
We need to have a very good relationship with the healthcare operators. And I would put those kind of like top 3 things, and I would allocate founder time to those. um, because when you go talk to the healthcare operators, it's going to be challenging. They won't try, they want to do an app, they won't, they don't want to do an API, I know for that for sure. And you need to
Right.
convince them to do an API, and that's going to take a year, 2, and then sometimes like having the founder resilience, it's super useful. But
Mhm.
at the same time that I think it's worth allocating founder time, I think it's worth having the being very humble from an intellectual perspective and knowing that you don't know, right? It's very important to know what you don't know. So you might have that superpower of resilience, but you don't know anything about how to set up a CRM. And if you
Right.
try to do that over your head of sales, either you hire the wrong person, that's why you're doing that, or you're being kind of like super tough to work with, right? Because like you hire someone that's a
Patient.
specialist and then you're trying to do their role. So I think those 2 things are things that I really look back and I would allocate more time since the beginning.
Great reflection, and I was really impressed by the clarity of your thoughts in such a general and open question. So, what did you tell yourself about what are the main problems or the main mistakes that you have faced that you would, if you would be able to go back? So, congrats. And finally, the last
I do
segment.
I do spend a lot I do spend a lot of money and time with self-development, and that's another so those things that I'm answering are things that I'm constantly asking myself and talking
Uh-huh.
about myself, like with my shrink or my coach, and I do feel that they make me a better leader. Like I have been spending a lot of time in order to be more conscious about who I am and the things I'm good at
Uh-huh.
and the things I'm not good at, and the things that I regret, and how I should overcome those things because it's not gonna go back in time. So that's something I also kind of like. I think it's very good money spent for founders, knowing yourself
Congratulations.
better.
Yeah, definitely investing in a coach and working in our self-awareness. It's super important and with a great return on investments. So let's go into the last
Definitely.
segment of the show where I ask a quick question and you give me a brief answer. And so let's start with the first one. If you'd have the opportunity to have a coffee with yourself at the beginning of Pipo, imagine Manuela in 2019 or 18, 19, right?
It's 19.
What advice would you offer to your younger self at that time?
Mm, I would say probably uh, so many things I would tell myself, but I would probably one of the things that I really think it took me time for me to figure it out was what is what are you expected to do as a CEO, and you are expected to call the shots and not necessarily to create alignment in decisions that you make with the co-founders, with the founding team all the time. I think in the beginning I was always trying to conciliate everyone's opinion and then make a decision, and I was very afraid to just make a decision and call it a
So,
shot. And I think that's very useful when you have co-founders. I do feel that we talk little about that, but it's important to understand that a co-founder is like an owner of the company, not very different from an investor, right? It's different
mhm,
because they have skin in they live that the day to day and they
right.
know a lot more about the day to day than an investor.
Mhm,
But you have the co-founder role and you have the executive role. So in the
right.
beginning, I thought every decisions I would make
Great
trying
point.
to conciliate my opinion with the founders and with even if the founding team. And I do feel that we lost a lot of time and energy just trying to get into those agreements that don't exist. And when you are a founder, you have to understand who is the CEO and who's going to ultimately call the shots, and you have to be in peace with that.
Love
And then
it.
you have to understand that there's executive role and then the founder role, and that's it.
Great advice. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
I think people's culture, I'm super proud about it. Like people love to work at Pipo. We are a remote company, but we are well regarded for being a company of a strong culture that people collaborate, that people are focused on solving our clients' problem. We're not focused on kind of like our own egos and trying to do our things, but disregard the others. So I'm super proud about that. I'm super proud about um, having created a company that people can be their own selves, like if they are kind of like, i'm I love Britney Spears, I can dance Britney Spears, Spears at the company's offsite and no one will care, because like that won't define you as an employee. That defines you as a human being, and you
Mhm.
are like, that's part of who you are and who you bring to work at People. So I'm super proud about it. um, and I just love kind of like building in general. I think it's very rewarding for you to see things kind of like really being services, products, helping people. We have so many lives that we have touched, so many diseases we have kind of like treated, and I think that's super rewarding to be a founder.
Awesome. Worst advice ever received?
Hmm, that's a tough one. I think the worst. I'm gonna be a little bit on the kind of like not so uh uh maybe kind of like I'm gonna say and I'm gonna explain.
Yeah.
I think the worst advice I ever received was kind of like the autonomy culture.
Mhm.
That a lot of people say autonomy is key, autonomy is key, autonomy is key. You have to give people
Mhm.
autonomy, and you have to give people autonomy. And then you read the Netflix book, and then you are like obsessed about giving people autonomy as a founder or as a and and to be honest, I love autonomy. I think it's great, but I do feel that we use
Mhm.
autonomy as anarchy.
Got it.
So having autonomy is not doing whatever you want to do
Mhm.
and not agreeing or not being able to seek kind of like agreement with people that are like the CEO or the CPO or the CTO of the company if you work like in product technology.
Mhm.
Having autonomy is having a clear direction of what's the objective you want to achieve and having autonomy over the delimited area of how you are going to do it, how you solve that problem, how you can create. But
Right.
you will never work alone. You will always collaborate with others, and you always need to seek approval. Like that's life. I seek approval. I have bosses. I don't do
Right.
whatever I want to do with people. And I do feel that we really kind of like listen to that autonomy mantra a lot. And
Mhm.
I think after a little while, people became a place where people felt, and especially in the beginning, that they could do whatever they wanted to do. And if people told them different, they would play the autonomy card. That's my autonomy.
Exactly.
But I think that's something that's really embedded in the startup culture today. But you have to take autonomy with a pinch of salt. If you want to hire the best talent, you definitely need an autonomous culture.
Mhm.
But autonomy only works if you can direct people and if you can cascade that direction to all the layers of the organization. So that's what people are trying to solve for. That are our objectives as a business.
Right.
That's the metrics we want to influence. Those are the sub metrics that we want to influence, and you
Right.
have autonomy to influence that metric and to test in this perimeter. But it doesn't mean that you want to do what you can do whatever you want to do.
Right.
You know.
It's kind of providing clarity, asking people as they are the experts what can be done to achieve a certain vision, even asking them what are their opinion about the vision. But as you said, if everyone could make decisions about the strategy, this would be a nightmare. So everyone can share feedback because I think that feedback is super important, but someone needs to have the leadership in certain topics to make decisions. Definitely, that's a great one. Love it. So resources, favorite book?
Um, Let me think. Favorite book? That's a tough one.
It doesn't need to be a business one. It could be a non-business.
No, if it's not a business one, I have an easy one. I love Ken Follett, and I love his trilogy about the wars.
Got
I
it.
think I don't know the exact name of the trilogy in English, but Ken Follett's definitely my favorite author. I
Uh-huh.
think if I had to say about a business book, I would probably pick. Let me look at my library. I would say probably The Hard Things About the Hard Things. I think that's a
Right.
very good book. Even though you will read in the beginning and you will say, it's nice, but then you will relate with the book more and more as you grow into the chair.
Exactly. Favorite movie or series?
Favorite movie or series? I would say Friends.
Got it. So we can understand why, and that's why you are building an amazing culture. favorite favorite podcast, excluding this one.
I would say probably Acquired.
Great one.
For those who are not familiar, you should, especially if you want to go deeper into the kind of like stories behind the company. It's really nice. It's really well done.
Really, really good. Manuel, it was really a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making the time, and you are always invited to come back and all the best for the next steps of people. Keep having that energy and that passion for making the difference in the healthcare world.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here.
And to our community, we keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. See you soon and keep scaling.